that you're going nowhere. Don't blame me for what you've done, because I know that you are having fun.
Welcome to the Clarified Realty Podcast, exposing the real estate secrets your agent doesn't want you to know. Here's your host, Tom Clary.
Well, don't you just walk away. That's when I'll say.
Welcome to the Clarified Realty Podcast. I'm Tom Clary, and I'm your host. I'm a real estate agent right here in the beautiful state of California, Los Angeles to be exact. I'm here with my co-host, Ron Bruno. Ron, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Tom.
Good. So,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We're starting 2018 strong. We've had a lovely time off. You went out to the East Coast.
The frozen tundra.
The bomb cyclone known as the East Coast.
Yes, I was in the perfect storm.
Yeah, I saw your photos from the tarmac.
Mm-hmm.
That was something like, am I going to get to leave?
Right.
Do I have to stay here for life?
Yeah. We actually were delayed a day, so it was interesting. So, it's kind of fun, looking at just kind of the progression of this whole storm. I remember, I think it was on Monday, looking at the forecast, and it said possible nor'easter.
That was the first, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
yeah,
so.
right.
Yeah, so it was a possible nor'easter. Like, awesome.
Yeah,
That's
right.
Great.
Right.
So, we were looking at our friends where we were staying, and we're like, I hope you don't mind if we shack up with you guys for the weekend, because
that floor is looking really comfy.
We might not get out because, I don't know about you, but
got any sleeping bags?
Possible nor'easters aren't really easy to fly a plane through.
No, right.
So, so we saw that, and then saw this thing just, go right up the coast. So it started down in Florida and then crept up to South Carolina, and it snowed in my hometown of Hilton Head Island and in Charleston.
It was snowing in Florida, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was snowing out of Jacksonville. And, it was crazy. So, and what's interesting is, usually when you have these nor'easters, it's the inside, so the inland places get the most amount of the snow.
Right.
But this one actually was all the coast.
Yeah.
So the Jersey Shore got inundated
like a
with
blizzard,
And then I don't know, Karen, my wife, was telling me about she saw some article where in Boston they had frozen sharks, and they had sharks that frozen
Wow.
solid. And there was a place at some mountain somewhere in New England where it was a negative 100 degrees.
What? Is that true?
Wind chill. Wind chill was
of course,
a negative.
wind chill, but yeah.
Negative 100.
Yeah, well,
that's crazy.
I sent you a taunting text to basically tell you that I'd seen that the wind chill in certain areas was going to be colder than Mars.
Yeah.
Colder than the surface of Mars.
Yeah, my mom's husband, he used to be in the Coast Guard, and he had a couple of expeditions in Antarctica, and he said it's never gotten that cold.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's insanity.
Mm-hmm.
What's so funny is on the other side of that coin.
Yes.
So when I'm seeing you go through this kind of craziness on the East Coast, and I say this every first of the year, every single first of the year, I turn on the Rose Parade, and I go shit, because every single time it's this beautiful, sunny, 80-degree day, or even more recently, and you just know that people are getting in their minds that they're sitting there. The white Christmas is over. The enjoyable, soft powder on the ground that threw snowballs for all of December. It's starting to really kind of wear thin, and they're looking at this gorgeous
and snow is overrated, by the way.
Right. And they are just looking at this vision of sun and beauty, and it's like you just know that they're just moving.
Well, that was what it was designed for.
Yeah.
So back when the Valley Hunt Club, which is a private club in Pasadena, they, the whole idea with the Rose Parade was to showcase to the rest of the country, come move to California, right? Because the weather is great, and everyone's bundled up and, sitting in their frozen whatever cyclones, and California is doing just fine.
Yeah. And little bit of a trivia, little nugget here.
Yeah.
And please, everybody, I want to hear mail. But it's so funny. I would only hear mail about the things that I do wrong on this podcast. But if it's my understanding is correct, and if my mom is correct, my great grandfather was the first Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade.
Really?
Yeah, he was the chief of police of Pasadena.
Very cool.
And Pinkham, I think, was his last name.
Okay.
But please, guys, I don't quote me on this.
I'm gonna Google it right now.
Yeah, I mean, we probably if only there was some sort of World Wide Web that would have this information. But
how would we find?
If he's not the first, it was supposedly he was supposed to be one of the first. But
that's cool.
But anyway, and I thought that and it was actually you brought this idea for the podcast this week because I thought it was, and I really thought it was a really kind of it seems like such a on the nose, really easy, kind of like why is the property here in California? Why is the property value so high? Why is it so hard
because of the weather
to buy a house? It's got to be because of the weather.
Got to be the weather.
These things, like literally, you're sitting on a tarmac wishing you were here. I mean, I'm assuming. So
yes.
So it seems a foregone conclusion. Okay, it's the weather. It's beautiful, and I think that is an aspect of it. But what we're going to really talk about on this week's podcast is it's really not the whole story. Actually,
no. There's many layers below it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's start off with the weather. I mean, let's start because we're already here. So it's, I guess that there, and it's not just, I think, also the weather. It's the whole lifestyle. You know what I mean? It's the whole idea of, the celebrity. They're not just seeing the sun and the beaches. They're probably seeing the beaches and all that but they could have that in Florida.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's also the celebrity. There's also Hollywood. There's also that idea that there's hot and cold running bad Brad Pitt's walking down the street. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which I think that also is a draw to some folks, that kind of idea of what California is.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you look at LA, I mean, Southern California in general, it's a desert with an ocean. Right. So it's a very Mediterranean, not a lot of humidity. It's just the way that, geographically desirable.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, you've got the entertainment industry, you've got the, the whole panache of being in LA and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it does have great weather. We do occasionally rock and roll from time to time.
We rock and roll every once in a while, and but it's also the idea, and specifically Los Angeles, and I'm not even talking about the Bay Area, of being so close to all sorts of different types of weather and geographies as well.
Correct.
Like, that whole idea that you can drive for an hour and be in snow, or drive for an hour and be in the desert, or drive for an hour and be at the beach, giving that kind of what's the word I'm looking at? Diversity in terms of, the experience. It's another big positive.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but one of the things that when we started kind of researching this whole idea that we kind of came across was that while that might be the kind of the underlying structure for why things are the way they are, the support of that structure is actually the reason that it's so bad can fall on to different reasons, and that could very well be the main bad guy that we're kind of going to be zeroing in on today is really kind of regulation in terms of, and by the way, you're talking to a guy who's a bleeding heart, and I'm not like completely against regulations and all that, but I have to acknowledge in these kind of circumstances that there is a part that is playing in terms of keeping the supply low. When it comes down to values going up, pricing going up, it's always a supply and demand issue. It's always about there being less out there to buy, and so you got to pay more for what's there. And so, but the reason that we're having that problem, we could, in theory, it's not like there's not land here. There's land here. There's ways to make more housing units. It's just that many times those kind of those ways that we could relieve pressure on the housing crisis, there are certain obstacles that are put in place that kind of exacerbate the problem, that make it worse. So I find a very interesting contradiction in that, I think that everybody thinks of California as a very liberal state. And yes, there is regulation. That's when you talk about liberals, they generally, they like to regulate things. Conservatives are like, get rid of all regulations. But the thing is that also, that kind of political activism that I see so much more in California than I see in other places, where we need to do something about the housing crisis. We need to, there are people who can't afford housing, blah, blah, blah. We need to do something. But at the same point, they're regulating in such a way that makes that absolutely impossible. So do you see what I'm saying in terms of the...
Well, it's almost the definition of NIMBYism.
Right.
Because, what they'll do is, I'll just pick on the entertainment industry, right? So you've got celebrities and you've got, producers and actors and actresses where they'll give money to a shelter and they will give their time and they will give their treasure, what have you, right? But if it entails building that shelter in the Hollywood Hills, they would be all against that. Right. So
because it affects their home value.
Because it affects their home value, it affects their view, it affects their way of life.
Right.
And, in the research, this is really funny. I mean, posing the question is one thing, and then it's like, okay, how do you do the research for the episode where there's value? I actually thought it was going to be a lot harder to actually find, and we went to this episode sponsored by Google, went right to Google and typed in, why is California so much overpriced compared to the rest of the country? And boom, there were 5 great stories, and Tom, you dug deeper.
Well, and by the way, it was a lot of statistics, and a lot of really, this wasn't like some sort of cursory, like, hey, we're doing an episode, No, this was in-depth research that people had done to go, why is it really so much more expensive in California than
I mean, it wasn't like, it wasn't a chat line on Trulia. I mean, it was actually, they were, stories from the New York Times and the LA Times and, and others. And, it's interesting. What they were pointing to was land use regulation, right? So in the in the 20s and 30s and 40s, everybody was moving to California and, for the warmer climate, for the different way of life. And in the 60s was really that turning point where people started to put down roots and they started to really establish themselves in the California lifestyle. And you know what? Even as the state was, especially in Los Angeles, as LA was growing, they were cool having, their land that they had, and they liked their view, and so they started putting in all of these regulations.
It was part of the lifestyle
and guidelines. And what it did was it constrained supply. Right. So as people wanted to move, and there was lots of land and there were a lot of places to live, but they put in all of these artificial supply constraints so that they would be comfortable with their ranch style home and their acreage and their views and everything else. But what happened was it squeezed, and they didn't prepare for all of the people that wanted to live there. Right. So they put them in, and I mean, this gets into the Watts riots and blacklisting and redlining and forcing, different communities into certain places like South Central. Right. They specifically did that. So they, I've seen lots of different, History Channel and documentaries about how, people, they forced certain class of people into certain places. And that's how, South Central and Watts and Compton and the irony is it's all coming back. Right. As places to potentially live.
That was the wild thing is, especially when they started talking about the Rams Stadium going up in Inglewood. All of a sudden I started getting a lot more interest about, hey, let's get some property in Inglewood and let's see what's going on in there. And it's this hypocrisy that sort of like, it kills me. It's because, I have it even in my neighborhood. I even, we have this whole new Warner Center development that's just getting, it's getting crazy, and you're hearing about putting a stadium out there actually, and things like that. And I go on my next door or whatever the the social media thing is, and I see them just everybody's just like, not in my backyard, we can't, whatever kind of thing. And they don't realize that, and these are the same kind of people that I see also like defending well, not necessarily defending, but definitely like saying their attitude towards the homeless and things like that. Like nobody's saying that they want homeless on the streets, but you have those folks who are kind of going, we got to do something about this, and it's not just about like putting them in prison or what I mean, like that kind of. We've got to find some solution to this problem.
We're scared of the word affordable housing, right? They are so scared of it because they feel that the property values are going to go down, crime's going to go up, and
traffic is going to go up.
Traffic is going to be more more congested, and their overall way of life is threatened.
Right.
And what they don't realize is they've put up these regulations where it's not possible for the people to buy, so they're forced to rent.
Well, and there's something about when there's availability. Sometimes demand goes up.
Yeah.
Right. So that makes your home values go up. Right. Because if you look at Santa Monica, right, people talk about prime land. Right.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be in Santa Monica.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And that's not going to change if somebody builds an apartment building there or two apartment buildings. People want to be in Santa Monica. And as long as you do it in a controlled, very smart way, there should be no reason that somehow affects your house or somehow affects your, just because there's, even if you might have to wait an extra 5 minutes in traffic, if I'm adding, it's a trade-off. If I'm adding 80 grand in value to my house, I'm okay with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's if I can actually go around the corner and find a store there that wasn't there a year ago because people want to be there, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. And since the 60s, they've every single year, they actually had statistics where they said that, that they purposely suppressed housing starts and permits.
Yeah.
So in other parts of the country, while people were growing, they allowed the city planners and developers to meet the demand.
The figure that I found in our research was that they were reducing it, that they reduced read this, one of the most restrictive regulations, caps on residential building permits is what you're talking about.
Yep.
Reduced construction of single family homes by roughly 30%.
Yeah. Exactly.
30%. So you're reducing that. So what do you think is going to happen? If you're not going to let people build, prices are going to go up.
Exactly.
And it makes it more unaffordable.
That's right. That's right. So they've, and you kind of mentioned this earlier today, it's really creating that, that society of have and have nots.
Yeah.
Right.
We're really, and I've never really kind of put it in the class kind of way, but I think it's going to be two huge classes. There's going to be classes of, especially here in California, not necessarily in the middle America,
right?
But here in California, you're going to have the haves and you're going to have the have-nots, and it's funny over the break. I get screeners for the movies and because I'm in the Producers Guild, and I was watching Blade Runner 2049. Right,
nice.
And it's so funny because you watch that and you're kind of like. Back when the first Blade Runner came out, the idea that in 2021, I think it was that one, if I remember correctly, which is 3 years from now.
Yeah,
3 years from now, right?
Right.
There's no way that could, or maybe it was, an interesting idea to think about that. Right? But what's fascinating is looking at 2049, right? And it's now even worse, right? In 2049, it's like even like more sprawl of these, tall, crazy, people living in like canyons of buildings, you know what I mean? And things like that. And the way that we're going in terms of the regulations and the way of the NIMBYism and all that, the way you're talking about in terms of people wanting to keep their ranch style home and all that, that's just not going to happen here in LA because folks are not going to let that happen in terms of, if you want to build a three-story apartment building next to a house, and they're like going, or a number of houses, and they're like, you're going to break my, you're going to break up my view of the mountains or whatever like that. You're going to have height restrictions. That's another thing that was a big thing that we saw in the research is that height restrictions. You think that that's like not a big deal, but okay. Well, that stops a 3-story building to be built that could have 30, 40 units that could house people, right? That would lessen up some of this pressure on prices. Yeah. But they can't get things built over 1 story because there's height restrictions in areas. It's ridiculous.
Well, and you also look at it from a geographic standpoint, right? So LA is bordered by mountains, desert, and an ocean. Right. And some of those places you can't build.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
You can't obviously build, property in an ocean. Yeah. And not a lot of people, not everybody wants to live in a desert. So you've got the valley, you've got the west side, you have the hills, but that's kind of, at a whole nother stratosphere. And then you have the Inland Empire and Riverside. Right. Right. right? So, and not everybody wants to have a 2-hour commute.
No.
So everybody's trying to get into this particular, place that, in the valley and in on the west side. And if you have homeowners that have, they're the ones with the power, they're the ones that go to City Hall, they're the ones that, vote and have the, they are the ones that grease the skids. They're kicking people out, right? So they don't want that 3-story. They don't want the 2-story. They don't want any story. They just want another home to look like that in their, within that looks like them.
Right.
Right. So until they, they're not changing their mind, right? They're getting older. So usually when you get older, you're kind of getting more set in your ways. They got to die. That's really the only option.
Right.
And you have to have the next generation, which is the, and the whole new trend of NIMBYism, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, please put a, medicinal marijuana, place right next to me. And this time you don't even need it. Now you don't even have to have a card.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
anybody can go and get an ounce.
Well, it depends on if you're talking to Jeff Sessions rap, but
true, yeah.
But I completely look. I've always found myself on the side of the folks who are bullish on growth.
Yes,
right. I'm not one of those guys who, I want folks to understand that it's not just, I don't want somebody putting in a 10-story building next to my house. I don't. Okay. But that's reasonable.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. You're in a neighborhood. They're all homes.
Right.
You don't want a 10-story building, boom, right there.
No.
And then next to
But that's not common sense.
Right.
And so what happens is when everybody throws up a red flag about everything.
Yeah.
Then it starts to get into nothing happens.
Correct.
And it's interesting because another thing that we were kind of looking into is that, okay, so you get these regulations that happen in communities, right, or neighborhoods. And, they're trying to keep control of what's going on in their neighborhood. So you could make an argument, like, they have these states where they have the battling tax rates, right? Where it's like, hey, well, you can't, we'll give you better tax rates over here. Come over and do business over here. And, it's right next door, they're having a war in order to get more business and get more, people living there or whatever. So because the tax rolls go up and all that kind of thing, right? And it's like that kind of battle. It's like, oh, you can't do it over there. But the opposite is happening here. We're actually seeing that neighborhoods, when they see like a neighborhood next to them say, okay, we're doing this restriction, they're saying, well, we better incorporate that restriction because then we're going to get everybody who can't do that over there over here. And then we're going to have a battle over here. Well, then that basically now everybody's throwing up a red flag.
Right.
And the red flag is meaningless. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's, if it's going to better the neighborhood or if it is going to improve value, I think people are on board. If you just look at what's happened with, Snapchat moving into Venice, right? It set off this whole Silicon Beach, phenomenon.
But I'm going to have to interrupt you there. I have heard quite the opposite.
Okay.
Like I've actually seen protests about the Snapchat thing coming in and complete, and like it's the same with Google up in the Silicon Valley and
Twitter
in San Francisco or all those.
Twitter moved into the Tenderloin district and put a lot of the artists and out out on the streets, right?
So I've seen that too.
Rents went
exactly right. So I've seen that too, but I can also see the other side of that story where it's about the folks who live there. It's so funny. It's like I keep on bringing up this word hypocrisy, where they keep on having their value of their home go up. They're getting a better, they love having the Whole Food move down. Well, that's nice. It's nice that I got a Whole Foods down the street, but that's, I gained $50,000 of my, on my appreciation of my house this year, but that I don't want, but I actually, well, it's nice that I can go to, there's an, they have a concert in the mall, but I don't like that, but except for that, I don't want, and it's like all these kind of positive things, and they're kind of, it's this knee jerk kind of reaction to, without any kind of really in depth. I mean, this is something we kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, kind of is part of the whole thing this podcast is about, is about learning. And, part of me is wondering if I'm going to start, when I start hearing folks kind of like knee jerk, not my backyard and that kind of thing, start going, okay, what actual information have you heard? What actual, like, have you seen the impact studies that have been done? Do you, what is your research? Oh, well, I just know that if it comes in, there's going to be more traffic, more crime, more.
Right.
No, you don't know that because you don't know what's being put in place. You don't know the specifics.
And I think what I was saying is, the positive aspects have primarily been, I'd say, commercial first. Right. So you have these tech companies that are moving and setting up headquarters in Venice and Santa Monica, and that land and the commercial space has gone up in value.
Yeah.
Right. And the existing homeowners that live there, their property values have shot up.
Rising tide, lifts all boats.
Right. But the people that are renting in that place and that aren't on rent control.
Right.
And you've got a young programmer at Snapchat, and he now he's making $150,000 a year, and he's taking your rent, he's going to take your spot, and they're kicking you to the curb, right. So you're priced out. So the renters, they lose in that whole transaction.
Right.
Property owners, they win because the value goes up.
And that's another thing. We're talking about the renters. Of course, you're going to
and the city hall, they're on board too because now there's more revenue.
Right.
So no more revenue, more, so it's so what they're doing is they're saying yes to growth. They're saying yes to increases in property values and all that, but they're saying no to what is desperately needed. And that's housing, affordable housing, right. That gets pushed aside.
Right.
And that's the definition of NIMBYism, because they're saying, you know what, I agree. California needs affordable housing, and we need to make sure that people can, on a regular wage, have a place, just not here.
Not here.
Not in my backyard.
Right.
Down the street in another city.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Because I think the initial kind of, when you hear not in my backyard, there's that kind of feeling of a, rejection without thought kind of thing, right? It's or even a rejection of an absolute, like, never anywhere kind of thing, right? Like, but I find hysterical the idea that everybody doesn't want the homeless on their street, or they don't want they want rents to not be going crazy, or but that doesn't happen until you have more places to put these people. You have to have more places to put them.
Right.
Or else it becomes worse. It doesn't become any better.
Exactly right.
And so, I mean, I guess the idea here is that in terms of solutions, I mean, it's almost more of a public information issue than it is about a regulation issue.
Right.
It's really about, telling, really getting down with folks and saying, look, I understand you have this attitude towards this new development coming in.
Right.
But we all need to kind of find a common sense way that we can all come together, or else things are going to be worse for you.
Yes.
Right? I'm a big believer that there are, in most circumstances, that if you keep on kicking a can down the road, or if if you're somehow, deciding that you want to push it off on someplace else, at some point it's going to come into your face, and you're not going to have a choice of how to deal with it. It's going to be a point where it's like, okay, now you've got a bigger problem because you decided to foist this over on somebody else.
Right.
So now what?
Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the articles that I was reading, they were talking about other places, right? So they were talking about other cities, and they mentioned Dallas, and they mentioned Atlanta, and they said that Dallas and Atlanta are very much like California, Southern California in the 60s. So they're at that crossroads where they've gotten a taste of, their property values coming up, lots of demand, lots of people moving in, and they're starting to, put down their stakes and say, I don't want that particular project, or I don't want that. And, I like my big, Texas lawn and my neighborhood and all of that. And it's just history repeating itself
all over again.
Right. So, are they going to learn the lessons from California? I don't know, but they're at a very interesting cross section where it can go one or, the other way, and that's part of it. I mean, I think, I certainly learned a lot, just doing, looking at the research and realizing that, even if I was, absolutely loaded beyond belief and having my, big giant land, you have to be open to have others live around you.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just, completely isolate yourself.
Now, probably the most compelling argument on the other side that I heard was actually from another real estate agent, actually.
Yeah.
It was basically talking about, okay, we totally get that we need to have development, right? Because he understands the concept of, and forgive me if I don't remember his name right now, but it was in one of the articles.
He was a Berkshire Hathaway guy, I think.
Yeah, I think you know what you're talking about.
Yep.
And he agreed that there needs to be housing, but he said the city's aging infrastructure, the crumbling sidewalks, bursting water mains, isn't equipped to support more people. He agrees that there needs to be more housing, but he said the city's aging infrastructure. Oh, sorry, I just read that again. Sorry, but basically his idea was, it's not about not in my backyard, but we got to fix the backyard first before we start talking. And he's right.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of there is a lot of infrastructure that when those water mains were bursting every month or two, it's kind of like another water main burst when was it? I want to say
down
Coldwater
UCLA?
Canyon. Oh, there was one in Coldwater Canyon. That, it was all these. Nobody, I think when they first built, one of the most amazing well, I'll get to that in a second, but one of the most amazing things that I heard was that, the Sepulveda Pass for the 405, right? When they first built it, right? And it's literally everybody knows it's the most clogged, traffic way that there is in probably the country, at least. And
there was affordable housing there and caused a fire.
That was the other. Yeah. I think the dude in his shack
homeless
was probably,
encampment doesn't quite count as affordable housing.
And a hot plate that caught a tree on fire. But other than that, but when they first designed it, when they first were putting all the plans together. They did it in like the 50s, and they thought that the absolute most amount of cars that would pass over it in one day was 50,000. Right?
Wow.
And it's, we're running into that issue where we're running into the short thinking of those folks back in the day, basically. And then God bless them, they didn't know how they could, there's no way, there weren't any computers to run simulations back then. They could tell them, no, hold on a second.
Right.
There's probably going to be about 2 million cars crossing over that a day or whatever it is.
Well, you knew at the turn of the century about the Red Line. Right? Do you know that whole story?
No, go for it.
Okay, so in California had one of the most advanced railway transportations. We know them as subways.
And then the doc, what's his name from Roger Rabbit, came and he took over Toontown.
Close.
Isn't that what we were talking about?
Not quite. But what happened was they created the Red Line, and it was the subway to the sea, and it was from downtown LA to Santa Monica. And there actually is a memorial, a monument, what have you, where it actually shows the end of the Red Line. And it was revolutionary back in the day. And what happened was Goodyear and another car company, I'm blanking on the name, but they colluded and said, you know what? We want people driving in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
We want LA to be a driving city.
Yeah.
So they bought it and decommissioned them all.
Yeah. No, it's so funny because
we can create a culture of drivers and create this whole congestion. And for years and years and years and years and years, no one's done anything, to expand the existing metro until recently.
Right.
But they're buying it at today's pricing.
I'm sure that's where they got Roger Rabbit from.
I'm sure. But that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like it was the it was definitely the NIMBYism, and it was special interests, right? So they were interested in selling tires, and they were interested in selling cars. So they didn't want people riding on rails for New York and Chicago. LA is going to be different. Everybody's going to be driving and smiling, and you know, they never saw smog. They never saw that crazy stuff that happened in the 70s and 80s. Right? They didn't have an idea of what could happen, and it just LA kept expanding. And, they didn't just until recently really, take that next step and build the extra metro rails, and people are benefiting from it.
No, absolutely.
And
the folks who have, the people who are benefiting from it are not just the commuters who are riding on it. Right. The people who have homes along the edge of them. I mean, that's,
and they thought they thought their values were going to go down because there was a station that's going to be right near them. It's actually gone up because people now have an affordable way to go to work. I mean, I take the metro, here on the Gold Line, from my house in Arcadia to, here we work in Pasadena, right? But it's just easy, right? It's
back to my point about the sewer main breaks, not the water main breaks. Yeah. They had no idea that we would have the throughput that we needed. And of course the pressure on those aging lines eventually was going to give. So I totally get that. There are some very good points there that have nothing to do with, crime, with traffic, with, traffic in terms of, not being able to infrastructure wise deal with it. But those are reasonable arguments that I would definitely say, okay, yeah, that's a good point. But that being said, we still need more housing. It doesn't change that. Right. Your concerns are not pacing with population increasing. So we got to figure this out faster.
Well, and what's happening is, I mean, in California, home prices are 2.5 times higher than the rest of the country.
That's insanity.
On average.
Yeah.
On average. So that's like, 150,000, and then, it's 400,000 as an average home price. Yeah. And that's a starting home price. And, there's so many different stories about, people coming from the Midwest where, they had a husband and wife and they both were earning about $100,000 a year and they were living like kings. Yeah. And they come here and a starter home is at $750. Yeah. And that doesn't even have a backyard. And it's a real challenge, a really big challenge.
Right.
We've got programs in place to get you in and, all of these things. But, just to be honest, some of that stuff's a Band-Aid, right? Yeah. Because what you're doing is you get people in debt.
Yeah.
A lot of debt. Right. So you've got to, it's not just getting in the home. I mean, you have the appreciation, which is awesome and all of those things, but also you have to, as more and more people can get into something they can afford and there is a greater homeowner because everybody benefits from home ownership.
Yeah. So, little bit of a figure here. Apparently, Mayor Eric Garcetti set a goal of building 100,000 new housing units by 2021. But the problem is that he keeps on getting run into with all sorts of, resistance by these NIMBYs, and it's so funny, it's just like, at some point, something's got to be done in order to relieve some of the pressure. Yeah. It's just the way that it goes.
Right.
And I think 100,000 is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
I mean, and even he's getting resistance for that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, it is a bit about the weather, but at some point it's about supply and demand. That's really the heart of it all. Anything else do you think that we, in terms of this topic?
No, I mean, I think that's kind of a good condensed, I think the biggest thing is, it's not just the weather, there are underlying factors. And, I think it's a good lesson in, what to do moving forward to try to ameliorate make it better, the process.
I was pulling out my dictionary.
There you go. Exacerbate, worse, ameliorate. There you go. So I think it's a good roadmap and it's a good discussion, to be open to thinking of, how do we make, how do we help not just put Band-Aids on it by making it, easier from a lending perspective and from a, home buying perspective, but actually addressing the issue,
right.
the underlying issue.
Right.
And making sure that for future generations that they have a better outlook.
Right.
Right. They're not caught in this. And I think the next generation, they're very much in tune with this.
Yeah.
With the NIMBY and people, and there are more and more people buying duplexes and threeplexes and fourplexes because they're like, I'll just go in with all my friends.
Right.
And I don't want to keep paying $2,500 to rent in Pasadena.
Yeah.
I'll just buy a duplex and bring my buddy.
Yeah.
Right. And he can just pay me and I'll be a homeowner.
I really think that to kind of wrap this up, I think that at the bottom of this is really an education and a branding problem. I think, and I'll start with the education. The education is like I talked about. It's talking to folks and kind of getting them to understand that in a way that if they just keep on saying no and if they keep on kicking the can down the road, what's going to eventually come back to haunt them is something so much worse.
Yeah.
That if you can actually be involved in the process, if you can actually what is it, jiu-jitsu, where you like go with the person's, the momentum. What is it, jiu-jitsu or what? I can't remember. It's one of those martial arts where it's literally like, look, come with us, and you're gonna have more power.
Capoeira? Is it
Capoeira? What?
Capoeira? Is it like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu where you're like moving?
Oh no, that's a dance.
Oh, that's a dance.
That's a dance thing. That's the dance version of, I think, Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Got it. Okay.
But we're so down off the track here. But it's go with it. You're going to get further with everyone if we get together.
Right.
And, it's like, I see folks who are elderly who, family and stuff like that, where it's like they keep on saying, they're getting older and older and older. They're in their house, and it's kind of like, well, you better figure out a way. Where are you going to? Because you're going to reach a point where you can't take care of yourself. Your systems are going to fail, and there's not going to be a choice for you. Right? We're going to put you wherever we can. Right? So the same kind of thing goes for this, right? If you keep on waiting, there's going to be a problem that comes that you could have prevented by being involved in the process. If you'd been there,
right,
had a voice, actually came up with something that everybody could agree with. It's you talking across from me at a table or yelling at me across from a table or online. With your stupid ass comments about, whatever, and I'm a bleeding heart and you're a, a-hole Republican or whatever, that doesn't actually solve the problem. So if we get together and we solve the problem, that's what we really need to do. So it's an educational / folks just getting together and talking about a thing, but also branding. When I think about, when you use terms like, low income housing, right? You hear that, and fire bells are already going off in most people. I don't want that in my neighborhood. I don't want low income, because that implies like there's a crack addict that's, in the hallway and the projects and all that kind of. No, we're talking about stuff that can actually get folks who could potentially buy maybe or rents even, it gives them an opportunity to not be, living hand to mouth or to be, not being able to find a home and being the slave to rents for their entire life. It's just about, I think we need to rebrand. I think calling it low income housing in some way just kind of puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And if we could figure out a way to kind of pitch it, it's like, yeah, no, but you don't understand. This is something that's going to help relieve the pressure on the housing market that could, that is not going to necessarily harm you in any kind of actual way.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's not going to be folks literally, drug addicts on your corner. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a development that gets folks into homes. So that's kind of my final word on that. Anything you also want to add, Ron?
No, I think it's time to go to City Hall.
I think so. We're starting our march. Our protest begins at 1:00. No. Well, that's about it for today. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them for us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Clarified Realty Podcast, all one word. If you have any questions about real estate or you're looking for someone to help you buy or sell a home, remember, I'm actually a licensed real estate agent. I'd love to help you out. So please email me directly at tom@clarifiedrealty.com. realtypodcast@gmail.com or give me a call at 818-335-7662. Don't be shy. Come on, guys. Give me a ring. For more exclusive bonus content and advice between episodes, please check out our website, www.clarifiedrealty.com. Also on our homepage, you'll find links to helpful buyer and seller guides that can give you some great information for starting your home buying or home seller process, so definitely check those out. Here's something we're really proud of. We have a top-ranked Alexa skill. So search the Alexa store for the Clarified Realty Podcast, add our skill to your daily briefing, and get a dose of real estate news and tips every day of the year. Definitely give it a try. It's really, really cool. I'm on Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram as well. My handle for all three of those are @ClarifiedRealty. Please leave feedback and reviews on iTunes or in the comment section on our page. Together, we're stronger. So if you have any questions or ways that we can make this podcast better, please, please, please let us know. My amazing theme song, Hey Now, is from the band Wolf. That's Wolf with 2 Fs. And please go check them out and like them on SoundCloud. And just a little fine print here. My brokerage is Keller Williams Encino Sherman Oaks. I'm licensed by the California Bureau of Real Estate. And my license number is 01715353. Ron's is
Guaranteed rate, NMLS 2611, NMLS ID 558706, California and Texas.
The advice we give is only for properties located in the state of California. For all other states, please contact your local real estate agent or real estate professional. Well, that's about it, Ron. You all good?
I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by, everybody. And remember, the greatest thing you can ever do is make someone feel at home. Take care. We'll see you next week.
What you gonna do? Hey now, 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 hey now. What you gonna